right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining me today. While the 40-20 is still apart, I got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to try and answer a couple of them. Just super quick, theory of operation of the PTO brake. How does it work? Common things that you've seen fail. And then, do we need to be adjusting our PTO linkage or our traction clutch linkage on these power shift tractors? I'll start on the second one first, and I'll say no. They're not like a dry clutch that as that clutch wears, we need to be, or even the brake, as it wears, we don't need to be adjusting linkage to compensate for wear. The power shift tractors kind of have their own set of diagnostics. I'm vague. I'm not replacing a tech manual. I'm trying to complement your tech manual as you're reading it to bring you kind of that visualization of what the book is trying to tell you. So use these videos next to your book, not to replace your book. That's why I usually don't have a whole lot of specs, because we have the same theory of operation across many, many tractors, and there is specification differences. So I'm trying to do a good job with speaking in generalities, if that makes sense. So let's just get into this. The PTO brake, fast, simple. We'll be done here in 1 minute. So there's your PTO brake, and it stops this gear. There you go. That's it. That's it. You have this locating pin. Okay, we'll expand a little bit. So there's a locating pin so this don't rotate. In normal mode, like you're driving around the field disking all day, this drum is hydraulically pressed into that gear, and when you turn your PTO on, then this spring pushes the drum back away, so it's not sitting in there rattling and wearing out. It's kind of that simple. There is a test. So in the scenario of, hey, with my lever off, PTO works fairly normal. The baler stops when I shut it off. The baler turns on when I turn it on. But I just got to shut the key off to hook and unhook PTO shafts. The most common things that we have seen is the padding has fallen off or been rubbed off. That locating pin is broke, so the piston's just spinning. Or there's been a failure in this gear and these bearings, and so they're now sitting crooked, and the brake can't do its job. That's the most common things we see, but you can come in here. You've got traction clutch, PTO, clutch, and brake pressure ports. You can do a pressure test to see when you're in brake position, are you getting brake pressure? And if you're not, then I would look at the packing. Either way, if you're having a PTO braking issue, that's a lot of work. So you got to split it here first at the clutch housing. You got to pull your input clutch pack out, and then there's 2 bolts coming from the front, this direction, coming from the front right here. And so then you reach up inside, you get them 2 bolts loose, and they're the ones that thread in here. Take them 2 bolts out, roll your engine and clutch back together. Obviously, you're going to leave that out. Roll these back together, and then you can separate there and fix whatever you need fixing. It's that simple. The nice thing about a simple system, there's only a couple things that can go wrong, and so it's usually the same couple things that go wrong. As far as the traction clutch and PTO clutches, if we are in a scenario where thinking that we need to adjust our clutch because when we push the clutch pedal down, I'm sure somebody's going to be along shortly to say it's an inching pedal. When we push our clutch pedal down, as long as we are hitting this pin, our pin, fork, and hole, our rod and hole, our pin, fork, and hole, as long as them things aren't just completely trashed. When we push the clutch pedal down, if we had a pressure gauge on our clutch valve, we should see our pressure go to 0. If that pressure goes to 0 and the tractor wants to creep, and so we just, every time I go to stop, I push in the clutch, the tractor slows down, but to finish stopping, I have to tap the brakes. So do I need to adjust my clutch pedal? No. What is happening is you've got these C1, C2 PTO. So C1 and 2 are the clutches that are controlled with the pedal. Depending on the gear you're in, it's either 1, 2, or both at the same time. So they're the ones that get all the abuse. So when you're doing loader work or round baler and you kind of leave and you're feathering out a lot, these are the two that are getting there. So if you're pushing in the clutch pedal, pressure gauge says 0, but you still have to tap the brakes to stop the tractor. These are the first two I would look at, and that makes sense because you have to get to them before you get to them. So let's tear these two apart, do a visual inspection. You're going to see warped disc, and I have that in another video where the plates are actual beveled. They're warped bad enough to be beveled. Don't be fooled. If there's a notch on the tab here, that plate is supposed to be somewhat warped. They introduced warped plates to make clutches a little bit smoother engaging. But we're going to inspect these two first. You can follow the book, and the book is going to have very specific instructions to find what plates are warped. And so you've got a drag issue, I guess I could have answered that in 30 seconds. When you let the clutch pedal out, if you have system pressure, so with the clutch pedal out, if you have good system pressure, like let's say 165 pounds here, and you're like, hey, when I shift from 7th to 8th, it's kind of slippy and draggy. It's not that positive bull that I get. We can split here and we can inspect our torsion plate. It's a dry clutch disc with a throwout bearing. Actually, there's your throwout bearing right there. So it's a dry plate. So we can inspect that. But if we're slipping from 7th to 8th, highly likely these clutch packs are just gone. The fiber discs are just gone. And there's not much left to bite onto, assuming we have good pressure. If we don't have good pressure, then there's a chance we've got a leak in the element. As long as our clutch pressure compared to system pressure are close to each other. Yep, so low clutch pressure. I don't want to get too carried away, but low clutch pressure is still going to be bringing us back here. So I don't want to say don't do your diagnostic homework, but 90% chance if you're having some really slippage issues or a lot of drag, obviously just check clutch pressure to make sure that it's, up there. But highly likely you're coming to C1 and C2 because it's either leaking or it's shot on two different ways. How about that? PTO would be the same way. I turn on my PTO lever and it's just not quite holding the power back like it used to when you're doing something like a field chopper or snowblower. Then as long as you have PTO pressure that's fairly close to your system pressure, then again, it's just going to be in this plate. And you can see how common it is with the burning of this plate. That is very common. I've never had to take this valve off to fix a PTO issue, clutch or brake. See countless PTO clutch packs burnt up. This is a dime a dozen. See it all the time, especially around here with the old dairy tractors, the manure spreader tractors. They run that manure spreader or TMR, every day it gets some use. And the implements the manure spreaders and the TMRs are getting bigger, and the 4020 isn't getting bigger, so guys are giving a little more throttle and slipping that clutch on a little more to get that bigger mixer going. And so the PTO, the clutch packs just take the abuse. One thing I do want to show you before we go is the PTO linkage. You take this nut off, this panel slides backwards. And then you can see that little finger down at the bottom moving. That is held on, I believe it's a 1/4 inch nut, so a 7/16 wrench, and it's just the D slot through that little arm. So you just want to make sure that that little arm is fairly snug on the shaft going through. So that shaft goes through this thick cast housing into the valve housing that's sitting over there. So if you ever have to pull that housing off, you have to come in and get that nut off and that finger off. And so, you know what? You can see with the grass and stuff, a squirrel or somebody was making a nest in here. Not uncommon. On the PTO side, if you are having somewhat restricted movement of the lever, take that panel off, take this panel off, and get in there with an air hose and just blow all that crap out and clean up around that PTO lever, and then see if the problem don't go away. Sometimes it's that simple. On your sound guard tractors, it's the same, slightly different. You got your PTO linkages now on the outside, so you got your PTO here, your clutch here. On your PTO side, if that lever gets dirty out here, it might not let you get all the way up, and so then it keeps kicking your lever out. On the sound guard cabs, there is a rocker arm in here that is fairly common to break. So then you do have to take this off on the sound guard cab. So if you're, I should have clarified that. On your sound guard tractors, when you put your PTO on, if it all works normal, but the PTO lever kicks off, then I would look, then you will be pulling this off because there's a rocker arm in there. It's very common for that arm to break because when you turn your PTO valve on, another valve comes up hydraulically to hold your PTO on. That rocker arm breaks. There's little tiny pins in there. They look like the game Battleship. They're about that size. Them pins can break and disappear. And so that is the only scenario on the Sound Guard series where you're really getting into that valve housing. I don't know. There's so much to really talk about. Like I said, I'm just trying to give you a general idea of what's going on. Let me know if I did okay. I hope this helps you guys. Hope this answers your questions. And guys, I appreciate you watching.